But thanks for joining. It's every time we go to create a conversation around this topic, I always pause, right? Because I think you guys are the same, where we don't actually want to have a conversation around women in technology. We really want to just have a conversation around like how we're changing the world, right, and making a difference. So I wanted to direct our conversation a little bit that way, and a little bit about culture that we can do. So my first question for you is really around like what is one thing that inspired you to go after a career in technology? Catherine, you want to start?
Do you mind if I borrow the mic? Okay. All right. So for me, what really inspired me to get into technology was, it really actually kind of started with my parents. And it was really a desire for flexibility. So my mom was born in Seoul, Korea, and she didn't have any idea growing up that at the age of 20, she'd find herself in the United States, living a different life. My grandparents, the same thing. My grandmother didn't know, of course, growing up, that she would end up in Hong Kong and then in the United States at the age of 48, trying to establish her new life there. So flexibility has always been important to me, and I really felt like technology would provide that. It provides so many options. It provides the ability to work from home in different countries. You can go global. So I found that to be really appealing and something that was important to me.
In the early 90s, I was a business major coming out of college, and I looked around and thought, what is the biggest thing in business? Where is the most growth? And it was in tech. And so I actually took a job and learned how to code. Not saying I was good or bad at it. I don't know if Catherine would have hired me. But I actually went into technology because it was growth and it was the next frontier for business.
And maybe just related to that, what keeps you in technology today? Like, why have you made decisions to stay in these technology companies over the last, decade of your career?
I've decided to stay because I just think it's fascinating. It's really interesting. There's always something new. It's constantly changing. Our rate of change is very fast in the tech world, and it just seems to be getting even faster and faster. So I love solving puzzles, and I think I get to go to work every day and just solve a million puzzles. So I think it's intellectually interesting. And then the opportunity to work with just a team of people. I feel so lucky to have worked with so many great folks, to learn from them. They're bright, they're smart, and to be a part of a team that creates something bigger than yourself. You get to do that in technology, and so that's what drives me to continue with it.
Same thing. I just love that it's always cutting edge. And at my age, to be perfectly honest, to say I can tell my grandkids I know what's going on, I like that, actually. It's like grandma's got an Apple Watch, I mean, that's kind of cool. And I love that. I love that it is where the world is. It's not going back to the other way. I mean, I can tell you, I honestly remember when, the big deal was having a fax machine. And we still had mimeograph machines, right? I mean, come on. I can't even imagine going back to that world. And I love being at the forefront of that. It's stimulating, it's energizing. The people that it attracts people that have that same mentality, and it's fun.
So I agree with everything they just said, but I think it's two things for me. One is growth. And one of my favorite quotes from Sheryl Sandberg's Lean In book is she was talking to a mentor about should she go to Google. And her mentor said, when somebody asks you to get on a rocket ship, you don't ask what seat, you don't ask, what position, who's going to work for me, you get on. And tech is just having phenomenal growth, and with growth comes opportunities for you in your career. And the second reason is money. And, the average wage, according to the U.S. Census, a tech position makes 102% more. 102% more in money than the average worker of a non-tech position. So tech pays better, and there's more financial rewards in tech. And while I do love all these people and I love working for Josh, I go to work because of a paycheck, and so as well, and for financial gain, and there's more money in tech.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out. So maybe just, question on that. We hear lots of conversations around the gap in gender pay and that it's getting, decreasing. Do you have any thoughts on that, or, even strategies or ways you've thought about that in your career?
So The Economist did a study recently that I think it was going to be like 88 years. It was some horrific number before the gender gap the pay gap's going to be closed. And this is something that's near and dear to my heart. But if we get more women in tech, because of the stat I gave earlier about the 102% more in salary, it will do more to close the gender pay gap than anything else we can do. So I really believe these efforts, while they're good for so many reasons, and you and Josh touched on this, but a company that Catalyst has a study that a company that has significant women in leadership. Josh talked about, not just one woman on the board, but 3. But a company that has significant women in leadership performs 53% better in terms of ROE. That means they get their stock price is higher, the money they make in profit is higher, they get bought for more. So having women in leadership means more profitability, more money, it's better for the economy, and I think that it also will do a lot more to close the gender pay gap. And I think getting women in tech is one of the most important things, one of the most important economic issues we're facing as a country right now.
You couldn't have said it better. That study by Catalyst, I think, is just, we always get the question around, and Josh kind of mentioned it, right? Like, we just have to have women, so we hire women. Or the CEO roundtable said, well, the reason we haven't hired any women is because we can't find them with the skill set we need, which I actually don't agree with. And the studies bear out that it is an economic impact to companies, right? Like, we're not doing it because it was like someone said it's the right thing to do. Like, companies should be adding women because it is driving profitability and revenue. Right? And over 20 years, that's what the study says.
Do you want to perform better? Ask any CEO, do you want 50% higher profits? All of them will do whatever it takes probably to get that. Go hire women.
That's right. Yeah, which I think is totally agree. And I love the performance-centric conversation, right? Because I think that's how we get more women in tech, and that's how we educate the CEOs who are doing the hiring and their executive staffs to drive more women in tech, is by that conversation. So there's this other side of the conversation too, which is very culture-driven. So Kathy, I wanted to ask you, you have this torch, right, at Domo. This is your job, right, of thinking about that. And I worked with you years ago too. I know that you're passionate about this, but can you give us some insight? I know we don't have these are the top 5 things we should do, but what have you learned along the way that does help us drive more women into management, technology, and leadership positions?
So one of the things that Josh touched on was this idea that you hire the best person for the job. And I think that's the foundation. It's not the only thing you do, but it is a key part of the pyramid. And at the bottom of that pyramid is that you hire the best person for the job. And the diversity factor does follow that. Once you have that diversity on board, then you have to say, what are the programs, the benefits, right? The opportunities, the career pathing to give those diverse cultures in your organization the opportunity to flourish. But you have to go into it with not, I'm going to hire my network, which is, it is definitely the easy, comfortable thing to do. But it's how do you broaden that network and go out and look for the best person to do the job, not somebody that you know necessarily.
So what are your favorite programs that embrace diversity?
So we've got a program called Family First, and it includes our time off. It includes our Hot Mama benefit, which got a lot of press this year. In fact, I think it got more press than anything we did this year, which is hilarious, I think. But it also speaks to how important it is to people. And, so we have a benefit that we implemented because Josh's assistant, Michelle, was pregnant, and he said, I think this would be something that would be important to women. And so we give our female employees $2,000 towards a work wardrobe. We also have 12 weeks paid time off for our female employees. We have a $1,000 baby bonus. We have paid paternity leave. We're not as big as Adobe, but for a company our size, we're definitely leading the edge of that because we understand the demographic of our employees and what's important to them. Do we sponsor sports teams? Yeah. We have tons of them, right? Soccer and baseball and basketball. But we try to touch on programs that hit all of our demographics within the company. And I think that's what's important is that's when you become inclusionary. We do hack nights for engineers because that's cool for them, but sales could care less, right? They're not going to show up for a hack night. But there's certain things we do for our sales teams that we know appeal to them. right? And then we also look at what appeals to gender, to family, to, the different groups that we have within the business.
So Catherine, Josh talked about the fact that you have been attracting more female engineers into your group.
Right.
What have you found yourself like changing in your hiring practices, or what advice do you give to people as they look to hire and create more diversity, especially in technology roles? Because it is one of the harder areas to find lots of women coming into. What have you done? What's your secret sauce?
So it's a concerted effort. I think it first starts with trying to do it and making it a point to do it. What we have found is a great success if we go younger, actually. So we try and do programs with high schools, and we try and do programs with college. Our intern program is exceptionally strong at Domo. I'm a huge believer. And we have a lot of female engineers that come in through our internship program. It gives them the opportunity to work and to see what it's like, to experience the culture, because I was one of 3 computer science students in my class, and when you go through that for 4 years in college, you're not sure what's on the other side of that. And so our internship program is probably the thing that I would point to as a very actionable thing to do. Kathy mentioned the hack nights that we do. Most recently, we had a hack night where it was robotics, and so we invited a Lego League team to come. They happened to be teams of young girls that were programming, and so they got to come and be the TAs for the engineers, which was really fun to see. So, I think you get creative, and really it's the exposure, the conversations that really start to change the culture.
So, what have you guys found are things that you have implemented or you recognized as things that could make, like take Domo, for example, have you recognized that if you voiced something around, including women in this fashion, that it made a material impact in Domo and, specific successes or programs? I'm not looking for hiring things, but I can imagine that as you're sitting in the trenches every day, right, and you're trying to fill positions and you're trying to execute, that you notice certain things happening in the culture that you could impact. Have you had that experience, and what types of things have you seen and then changed and seen results from? It's a very hard question.
So one thing that comes to mind is Catherine was talking about our intern program, and this last summer we had 2 interns that happened to be female for a summer internship only. One came from MIT, one came from Berkeley, and they were both data scientists. And it was really interesting as I talked with my recruiting team about that. I was like, I wonder if this is maybe a more interesting career path for young female technologists where it's not already saturated with males. Is it also a preference of it's more creative rather than I'm coding, right, which is more structured? And so we really embraced that and brought these 2 female interns on. They were very successful. They've now become our ambassadors at MIT and Berkeley as we went back to the career fairs this year. So I think it's seizing those opportunities, right, to go, maybe here's something here.
Well, and noticing them, I think.
And I'll kind of add to that. This was touched on earlier, but I think in the recruiting process, it's really important to have diversity. So we found if we would include certain members of our marketing team as we were looking to hire new marketing candidates, even if they wouldn't be working closely with that person or they weren't somebody I would normally put in place to evaluate that candidate, it helped us think about, is this going to be a good fit from a cultural and diversity perspective? The second thing, at a company I was at before Domo, I definitely have worked in pretty much predominantly all male teams, and one of the women that worked for me said, sometimes in meetings I'm the only woman. So I started thinking about even just my leadership meetings and team meetings, can I maybe include some other people that wouldn't normally be in that meeting so it's not, me and 10 dudes and 1 girl. And so thinking about that, just seating. Kathy and I talked about this recently for my team, making sure that we bring teams together so that there's not, a clustering of predominantly genders or lack of diversity, because we actually do have a lot of diversity on my marketing team. I think it's 30 to almost 40% women, but based on how we were seating, they weren't sitting, some of them weren't sitting, there were some that weren't near other women. So it's the little things sometimes. It's the nuances that you don't think about every day as a leader, but the people in the trenches do think about. Who do they sit next to into their cubes? Who do they are at the lunch line with? Who do they interview with? How many other women are in the meeting, and are they afraid to speak up? So I think the little things make a really big difference.
I agree. I think it doesn't seem to be the monumental things, right? Like every startup can't provide 6 months paid time off, right? Like it's just not feasible on, those balance sheets. But those little things have huge impacts in people's lives and make a huge difference in their commitment.
So one of the things I was going to say is that in HR, there tends to be a predominance of females. And I have to make a concerted effort on my team that I have males. And so my team is 50-50 for that reason. And I've always been very strategic about that. And there was an incident that happened probably about 10 years ago. We had hired Shane Kohler, who maybe a lot of you in this room know. And I had someone come up to me at Omniture and say, I didn't know boys work in HR. Those were the exact words. So believe it or not, it happens everywhere. And I went, oh, okay. My team has to be the poster child team for that we have a good blend, and we do. And so I usually keep it right at 50-50, very intentionally.
Yeah, it's almost like, I often say this actually, anything that you don't intentionally decide got decided for you, right? And I think that this is one of those areas where if we are intentionally making decisions about how we want it to be, it already got created along the way. It just was a byproduct. And I think that's the thing that we have the opportunity to overcome. So I want to talk a little bit about the reputation that companies should have that make them interesting for you to go work for them, right? Because we did a study, I might have said this a few minutes ago, an economic impact study in the Women Tech Council. And outside of those two factors, you get paid enough, you got a good enough opportunity, right? That's a given. We're really, really driven by reputation of companies. I find that in the kind of women in tech community, we talk maybe even more than our male counterparts about opportunities we're looking at or companies we might want to go to. And the conversation always comes to like, okay, is that going to be a good fit? And you almost discount companies as you go through that list, maybe before you even get an interview there or before you even like take the interview. So I'm interested in your thoughts on, what are those key reputation drivers companies have to have to even make them attractive for people to want to come work for them? And I don't think they're all benefit driven. Like I don't really, I think you're evaluating so much when you take a look at a company, but I don't really, benefits are part of it, right? But there's this financial incentive that's a given because we all want as much financial reward as possible. But that reputation driver seems to factor in quite significantly for women. And what kind of reputation does a company need to make you want to go work for them?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think, something that you and Josh talked about earlier comes really into play with this, which is the network effect. The reputation is often driven by conversations that you have with your network and what you hear about, from that and the stories and the people that you get to know, where if you can see that there were opportunities for growth, whether you were man or woman or, whatever you may be, I think being able to see those examples of people starting as a staff engineer and then growing to different roles, I think those help, and that really help cultivate that reputation that a company can have for growth. And when you can look on their website or you can see stories about benefits, and it's kind of a holistic thing that you start to get this impression of what is it like day to day to be there. We all know that you're attracted oftentimes to work for a company, but when you make a decision to leave, oftentimes it's because your day-to-day was rough. And so really you're looking, I think, for signals for, what would make or indicate that the day-to-day is as good as the press stories and the direction that company is going.
I can chime into that and totally agree with Catherine. When I was younger, earlier in my career, I didn't think it mattered. Like I actually thought being a woman, I still think it's a benefit, but I always thought, if anything, it's helping me. Like I'm the different one. And I remember when I sat in a room with 6 dudes, my first job coding, they nicknamed me Scarlett. And one time when I was 21, I was like, oh, is that because I have a Southern accent? Because I used to have one. And you think I'm pretty? And they were like, no. They were like, you always get your way. Like you either flat out demand it or you sweet talk us into it. And it was kind of like, I used my diversity to I didn't realize at the time, to help. But as I grew farther in my career, I started, people would say, oh, it matters if this is a woman-friendly company or not. And I was like, whatever. And you know what? It's funny. I do think it matters because I've had 2 experiences. I worked at Oracle, which Safra Katz is the co-CEO. There's a lot of senior women there. You can and I moved up there. I worked for a woman for a while there. There were senior women and it didn't matter if you were male or female because there were strong, powerful women everywhere throughout the company. And then I went to SAP. SAP doesn't have one woman on the board, and 10 years ago in Palo Alto, they were having me go to these events because I was the most senior woman at the Palo Alto office, and it was one of the biggest offices. And yes, I think I'm amazing. I was very senior, but this was 10 years ago, and I was just a vice president. There were no other women in a 5,000-person office more senior than me, or even at my level, and it did make a difference. And I do think, to Catherine's point, having role models and people you can see and understanding that there's a path and there's senior women at it makes a big difference. And I think that's one thing that I think about if you're looking at a company and reputation is, do they have senior women at the top? It makes a difference.
It makes a difference. I think it goes to what Catherine said too, that day to day, right? Like we typically don't leave a job because of like the big messages that we're given, right? Like if we're dissatisfied in a job, it's all about what's happening on a day-to-day basis with our interactions inside of that company. And sure, there's some reasons that are justified in leaving, but I think we can materially impact that because if you have high-performing employees and they're consistently considering leaving, it's a problem. Do any of you do anything like how do you get into the brains of those women to make sure that they're engaged enough and they're satisfied and they want to stay? Like how do you make sure you don't lose all those software engineers that you just hired?
I ask them. I talk. I think it's important to start the conversation and say, how are things? Do you feel like you are growing? Do you feel like, at the end of the day, we're all captains of our own destiny, right? So everyone has to take responsibility for their own job growth and career growth and so forth. We get that. But I think opening the conversation is so important. It's something I've learned from Josh, that it's taking a moment and thinking through and saying, you know what, I need to ask. How are you doing? How are you growing? What do you want to do? Are there things that we can do to help? Certainly, it's never stopped me from asking as well, because I know I'm responsible to figure out what I need and to go ask for that. But I think just having those conversations is super important.
Couldn't agree more.
We actually created a Domo women's group. How long have we been doing that now? A couple years ago. We meet once a quarter. And it's generally, career-based. It started with just us sharing our stories, and then we've taken feedback from our female employees of what they'd like to hear. We're going to be kicking off a mentoring program this quarter, and I think our female employees were pretty excited about that. So it is that conversation, and it's another place we have the conversation, right? That I think we want our female employees to know that we do want to further their career, and that they do have an opportunity, and that please come talk to us, and they do. They come into my office all the time and want to know what they can do. And I think they feel very comfortable. They can go to their managers and their senior leaders and ask those questions. And I think that's a big piece of it is, can I go have the conversation?
Yeah, can I talk to people about this? So, because we're running short on time, I have kind of a question I wanted to ask all of you as we kind of end, which is, what do you know now, and this can be not just across the diversity issue, but what do you wish your 25-year-old self, like, what would you tell yourself now entering a career in technology? What would you tell? What would you have changed?
I would have told myself to not worry so much. I think that I was so concerned about everything, and will I do this, and how do I go do that, and so forth. And I think if I could go back and write a letter to myself, I would say to not worry so much. That if you surround yourself with really great people, and if you work really hard, it's going to work out. You are meant to succeed. You really are. And so I think enjoying that journey and really participating in it and taking it for every beautiful aspect of it that it is, that's what I'd tell myself.
I wish you would have told me that at 25. That's such great advice. I think it's find a good girlfriend. And I would use the term mentor because I do think I actually wanted to say find a good mentor, but it's not some senior person that doesn't know you well. Find a good girlfriend that knows you well. You have that friend that will tell you when, the guy you're dating isn't a great guy, the one who will speak up, or the one who will tell you your shoes don't match your outfit. Like, you need that in work. And I'll give you 2 examples. I was at a Silicon Valley company, and I'd moved up and inherited a bunch of teams. And I actually had a lot of men working for me that made more money than me. And I brought it up to my boss, and nothing happened for a year. And so I'm actually out at dinner with a woman who was a good girlfriend, and she was a peer. And she was the one who kind of smacked me and said, "Why are you not making a stink about this? I needed a good girlfriend." And the same thing, Jill Layfield is going to be on the judging later. When I was looking to come to Domo, this was about 5 years ago, and I was nervous. I wholeheartedly believed in Josh and his vision, and I wanted to just jump on that bandwagon, but I had this cushy job at SAP, and I was a little scared. And truthfully, my husband was a little scared too. He was like, "You're going to work at a startup? Like, I don't know about this." And Jill was one of the ones, we were at a TEDx event. She sat me down and said, "Why wouldn't you? Like, jump, try, let your wings fly." Sometimes you need that good girlfriend to really help you make the hard decisions. So that's the advice I would give. I didn't get some of them soon enough in the work world.
So I think it's interesting is that Catherine and Heather and I are all at very different places in our lives. And so I'm looking back further than anybody else. So I definitely have more perspective. But, it's funny, when you say 25, I think, oh my gosh, I had 4 kids in 5 years. I had my 4th child at 25, right? And I had no idea that you really, truly can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. And all is whatever you want it to be. I love that Josh said that. If you want to be a stay-at-home mom, be a stay-at-home mom. If you want to have a career and have a family, have it. There has absolutely never been a time in the history of the human race that it's been better to be a woman. Oh my gosh, we've got so much opportunity. Everything that my grandpa told me when he would take me to work and I would sit in the boardroom in my Sunday school dress, right, because he wanted me to be exposed to work, I get to have that. We are so fortunate to be where we are, and we get to change. We get to change it all going forward. What an opportunity. That, to me, would be the message.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being our panel today. You guys were amazing.